If you're quite new in this journey of applying and using vibrato, there are a couple of, or there are three sort of main pitfalls that I would recommend being wary of to try and avoid. The first one is this idea of lateral vibrato. Now, this actually is a legitimate technique, and I'll show you what it looks like in a second, but it's one that comes much more from classical guitar playing, as it is very, very subtle. So lateral vibrato looks and sounds a little bit like this. So essentially what's happening there is rather than following that kind of upwards or vertical and rotational movement, you're just moving your finger from side to side. It does affect the pitch of the note, but it's much, much more subtle when it comes to adjusting the feel of the vibrato. Because in that framework, you're locked in that lateral within the fret, essentially, and you can't really move beyond it. There are ways that you can adjust your vibrato approach to create wildly different sounds. That's the first thing I would recommend being wary of and trying to avoid. The second pitfall to watch out for is moving your guitar and the neck of your guitar a lot, but not altering the pitch and not actually applying vibrato effectively. So what we're aiming for is string movement, and we're aiming to sort of execute force and push it through that string in a very effective way. So if you look at when I apply vibrato, there's not a lot of movement on the neck or in the guitar. It's all applied through the string, like this. But a lot of players, when they're getting started on this idea, their whole bodies, they get really kind of, it's like they're, trying to lift a heavy weight or something. They get really prepare for it and go for it. But when they actually apply that force, it isn't directed into the string at all. And so they end up doing something like this. And just moving the guitar a lot, but not altering the pitch or applying vibrato at all, really. And as you can see, it doesn't look particularly comfortable. It's not economical. And, if you're playing for any length of time, you're just going to wear yourself out by so much physical movement that isn't really getting you to where you want to go. So if using your ear, if you feel like a lot is happening in terms of movement on the guitar, but very little is happening in terms of actually moving the string, then make sure that you're directing that force in an effective way. The third thing is applying vibrato to every single note that you ever play. Now, I must admit, I feel a bit of a hypocrite saying this because I just naturally apply a little bit of vibrato now to almost everything. I find it very difficult not to. And the blues guitar player, Robert Cray, he said the same thing. He finds it almost impossible not to play using vibrato because it's just become part of his style. And I think it's the same for a lot of players who've been playing for a long time. But when you're starting out, there is a lot that you are thinking about already. There's the mechanical challenge of learning solos, learning licks, navigating across the fretboard, doing all these different things. And so I think you have to pick and choose the notes where you apply vibrato. So if you're playing a phrase that has maybe 4 or 5 notes like this, if you're earlier on in your journey, just try to apply vibrato to that last note, because that last note is a long held note. You have that breathing room and you can just sit on that note and think about the vibrato and nothing else. What you don't want to have happen is you don't want to break up the flow of your own playing by trying to apply vibrato to every note. So you don't want to go because even though you've kind of, achieved the mission of hitting vibrato on every note, the rhythm of the phrase has been distorted, the whole phrase has been impacted kind of for the worse because it doesn't have that flow. And, you're then kind of splitting your concentration across all these different areas. So for now, if you're just getting into this, be selective on those notes that you choose vibrato. And I think a nice kind of simple framework to help you there is to just apply it on those notes and those phrases where you're not rushed. So it could be a note at the end of the phrase, could be a long held note within the middle of a phrase. But if you're playing or you're learning a solo that is challenging for you in terms of speed, that is not the place to really kind of dig deep and granular on the vibrato. Do it within a slower context where you can think and you're not rushing and worrying about the technique of playing something else. So those are the kind of 3 common pitfalls to avoid.